Okay. So the record of the meeting has been toggled. And now it's Danny's show.
All right. Okay. Well, hello. I guess the first, just quickly, why we go through this training for the modules is we provide more than just a PowerPoint presentation. There's certain components to it, to the module, both for the instructor and for the students. So we like to give you an introduction to them, and also like to talk about a little bit about the approach to the education format we have on these. This is a list of the modules we have available right now. We'll eventually get more. They're structured to coincide with the upcoming revision of the core manual. So we're looking forward to these modules. And one of the main things about them, and I'm going to talk a little bit about to begin with, is they rely on learning objectives. Have you used learning objectives much in your teaching or been exposed to them much?
Not a lot.
Okay.
I don't believe.
Okay. Well, we've been using learning objectives in our newer training manuals. And basically, I'll give you an update on how they work. A learning objective, as the screen says, is just a way of letting the trainees know what we expect of them. It's not a description of course content or what they can expect from us, but it's what we want them to learn, and we try to be fairly specific with it. And what they do is they really make training and learning easier, and I'll demonstrate that here. The DEC uses them as a basis for test questions when they're writing exams for manuals for which we have learning objectives in them. And they provide a way to prepare for the test, which is a lot better than just here's the book, read it. Also helps improve the test. And I'll touch on each one of these as we go through. So each module begins with a set of learning objectives, and then everything is structured on those. And again, like I say, they tell people what we expect them to learn, but it also provides us a way of measuring what they've learned. And that's really important. An example I always use, I talk about a phone system. Okay, suppose you have an administrative assistant. You've got a new phone system in the office, and you tell the person you want them to know how to use the phone system. Well, what exactly does that mean? What are they expected to be able to do? And so instead of just stating this broad goal, what we would do is provide learning or performance objectives. And basically, it's a way of rephrasing the knowledge or skills a person needs to be able to use that phone system. So they're simple, connect to the incoming line, transfer a call, put a caller on hold. Some of the basic things you want them to do. And the idea is that if they understand, if they can do these objectives, if they can meet those objectives, then they know how to use the phone system. But what it does is each learning objective relates to the goal. Like here we have retrieve messages, relates to the goal of knowing how to use the phone. It begins with an action verb to tell a person exactly what they're expected to be able to do. Because no doesn't really help. You can't measure you can't measure no. But retrieving, you can. And that's the key thing. The action verb makes it measurable. You can tell if someone can retrieve a message or not. And again, we assume the goal is achieved if the person masters all these objectives. Does that make sense so far?
Yep, it does.
Okay. And so what we do in the manual, the manual contains what we want people to learn, and the licensure test or certification exam is the DEC trying to get the person to show what they know. And what we want them to learn and what the DEC wants them to know better be the same thing, or else we're not doing our jobs. And so the way you bring those together is the learning objectives. They identify the required learning and they allow you to measure it. And I think the next thing here is going to be an example. Oh yeah, so as I said before, the test questions are based on learning objectives. In the manuals in which we have objectives, that becomes the basis for test questions. An example would be for a learning objective would be define pesticide drift and overspray. And here would be a test question that the DEC could write based on that objective. Okay, and as pesticide blank occurs when pesticides carried out of the treatment area by air currents, and the answer is drift. So this question relates directly to the objective which goes back to a goal we might have had about understanding pesticide drift. The nice thing about this is, if you give an applicator a book that has, say, a 5-page chapter on drift, they'll read the chapter, but they're always asking, what am I supposed to know? What do I need to know for the test? What this does, it tells them up front, okay, we want you to define pesticide drift. And they know that, so when they get to the test, if they see something like this, it's not a surprise to them. They understand this is what I'm supposed to learn. What it also does from the DEC perspective is it makes it much easier for them to write a good test item. Because in the past, we literally gave them the manual, which, as you know, can be quite thick, and they had to come up with test questions. And on what? And we developed a mechanism. I won't go through it now, but we developed a way of determining which objectives in the manual are the most important. So we would now give a list of those objectives to the DEC and say this is one of them on there that people think should be on the test. Then the person writing the test question has a really good idea of what they need to ask in the test question. So the questions become shorter. They don't meander like some of the other older questions do. You don't get these long, paragraph-long questions or anything. So it helps everybody all around. And in our manuals, and again, these modules are going to be paralleling the manuals, we have a preface, and part of the preface just reads how to pass the certification exam, which we hope is catchy for people and gets them to read it. And the idea is to have them read those learning objectives listed at the beginning of the chapter, then go through the chapter with those objectives in mind, and then go back and review the objectives. And the ones they can satisfy, they're good with. They can define pesticide drift, that's fine. But if there's an objective, say, recognize signs in a temperature inversion might be present, and they don't know that, that's the part of the chapter they should study. Okay, so it's a way for them to know if they know what they need to know. Because without this beforehand, they didn't really know. You know what I mean? They would read stuff and think they understand, but they're not sure if they know what we want them to know. And because of this, in the newer manuals, we don't even have review questions anymore, because the learning objectives act as review questions. And they cover everything. Review questions only cover a subset. The learning objectives cover everything.
Okay.
All right? And so to really show you how these work, you have your own learning objectives for this, our presentation today.
Oh, great.
Okay? Now, as we go through, I'm going to demonstrate, the parts of the module that we give you. And I'll be using the transportation as an example. So when we're all done, I'm going to ask you to list at least 3 topics that you should cover in your training before you start talking to people about how to transport pesticides. Okay, basically, what knowledge do they have to be able to understand before you can even talk about transporting pesticides? Okay? And the other thing is, I'm going to ask you whether the first truck shown in this presentation is photographed from the driver's side or from the passenger side. Okay? Right? All right? And there will be a test at the end, so we'll know if you fell asleep. Okay.
Yeah, you will.
Okay? Well, it'll give you an idea how these work. Okay. So when you get a module, as I say, it comes with more than just a PowerPoint presentation. It comes with an instructor's guide, which tells you the scope of the presentation. For example, transporting pesticides, it'll tell you that it covers, transporting pesticides basically in a truck or some vehicle. You're taking pesticides or pesticide equipment from point A to point B. But it's not really going to go into driving a sprayer down the road or driving a tractor down the road with a big spray tank behind you. Okay? But it lets you know that up front. You can always add that information yourself, but what's being presented doesn't cover that.
Okay.
It'll tell you who the audience is. It might be for private applicators or commercial or both. It might be useful for 30-hour course or recertification training, or both. And we'll let you know that up front. It will provide a list of that prerequisite knowledge I talked about before. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but basically what information you should cover before you get to this talk so that people can fully understand what you're going to be saying. A curriculum outline that talks about what needs to be covered, and a sample script and some handouts. And I'll talk about these things in detail now so you understand what's there. For prerequisite knowledge, again, it's an idea that I've seen in a lot of training manuals where the flow of information isn't all that great. You're talking about some topics that people can't fully understand because the underlying topics are talked about later. And the simplest thing I tell people is you can't teach a kid to spell or use a dictionary until you teach them the alphabet. So there's some things you have to know first. So what we would list as suggested prerequisite knowledge for transporting pesticides is obviously a person needs to know what is a pesticide. As you probably know, there's a lot of people who are new to the subject often think that only insecticides are pesticides. So if a guy's a lawn care worker and he's hauling Roundup around all the time, he might not realize he's transporting a pesticide. Certainly weed and feed will throw a lot of people. With respect to formulations, they can be important, especially in the advent of a spill. Different formulations pose different risks during a transportation accident. They're supposed to carry personal protective equipment with them, so they should know what that is, and they need to know, even before they know about PPE, they have to understand toxicity and routes of exposure, so they understand why they need to use PPE. You want to talk about environmental risks, so they understand when you talk about the chance of a spill during transportation, they already know why a spill is bad. You don't have to cover that again. Some laws and regulations, obviously here in New York, they have to carry, commercial applicators have to have that sticker on their truck when they're transporting pesticides, so they have to understand who the regulating agency is and that pesticides are regulated, things like that. And I put storing pesticides before transport. I used to do them reversed. But really transporting pesticides is kind of like a storage facility on wheels, really. So a lot of things that you cover in storage, like keeping them locked up, preventing unauthorized access, apply to transporting pesticides as well. So for each module, we'd have that kind of list. It helps you place a presentation within the course. You look at what you're teaching, and it helps you decide when to use this module in the course. It helps avoid unnecessary repetition. Like I said, you don't have to go over spills again and again and again, as if you're doing it for the first time. But it reinforces reminders in a new context. For example, when you do talk about spills in transportation, again, you don't have to say why spills are bad. You don't have to say why pesticide getting into a surface water is bad. But you can remind them, if you have a spill on a roadway, you might not see a lake or a stream or anything, but there could be storm sewers, storm drains, that feed into a surface water. And once you mention that, the earlier knowledge they have, they know why that's bad. Okay, but you're reminding them, here's a new context, here's a new way of looking at that spill. So it makes training more efficient, but also gives ways to have reminders in what you're doing. The trick is there's often more than one way to go. Do you cover spills before or after storage? Because when you talk about spills, you're going to talk about spills during storage. When you talk about storage, you're going to talk about wanting spill kits and preventing spills. So there's no perfect way of doing it. We just provide the prerequisites to sort of give you an idea of what you should be thinking about. Drift is another good one. Do you talk about before or after nozzles? There's no perfect answer, but it's just a way of looking at it. Then the last one I want to talk about, I just do this briefly, I guess, is the label. Where does that fit? Now, have you given trainings before?
I have.
Okay.
I've inherited this course from Carl, so
Okay.
basically I've taken what he had done. I and now I'm looking into updating it and improving.
Okay. Where in the run of the 30-hour course do you cover the pesticide label? Is it early, middle, late?
I actually haven't done a full 30-hour
Okay.
course.
Okay.
Maybe that's 4 hours. And honestly, I believe it's at the end.
Okay, well that's good actually. A lot of times people put the label up first, it's so important. And the problem we've had with that is that all these items are on the label, and if you cover the label first, I always wonder how someone is going to really understand the importance of the label statements on exposure if they haven't really been taught that pesticide can go through the skin. A lot of people, their first thought is you get sick from pesticides by ingesting them.
Right.
So if they don't understand that dermal exposure is bad too, they might not understand why it's on the label. They won't understand why all this drift language is on the label until they've learned about it. So what we actually suggest is when people go through training, especially if it's a 30-hour course, that when they talk about pests, they maybe have a sample label for people, and they talk about pests and have them look at the label and see where pests are listed on the label. Then they talk about pesticides and have them look on the label, see if they can find if it's an insecticide or a systemic. You talk about formulations, have them look on the label for the active ingredient, how much active ingredient's in the container, if they can tell from the brand name what the formulation is, things like that. The idea being that over and over they're learning something and then finding out that information's on the label, and it just reinforces how important the label is and how useful it is. And then at the end have an all-encompassing label presentation. I bring that up now because Ron put together a label module that does just that. So it sounds like you're kind of doing that already, so that's good. Oh, you got a scan coming. Why isn't this?
Click it. On asleep.
There we go. Okay. Don't scan?
Yeah, don't scan.
All right. All right. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. Okay, so that's the prerequisites. The curriculum outline. What it does for each learning objective that's listed in the PowerPoint presentation, it lists some key concepts that must be covered, or that really should be covered, but it also provides suggestions for discussion. And right now I think I'm going to show one of those. I got to remember how to do this. I come down here, I go to share my screen, and here's the curriculum. And let's see, I want to go to... Okay, so now you're seeing the Word document up there? Okay. So the first learning objective for transporting is describe the risk associated with transporting pesticides. That's up here. And some key concepts are, transport is really a storage area on wheels, so everything about storage applies. Driving itself poses hazards. Drowsiness is an issue. Accidents can cause spills. Just some of the basic things you want to talk about. And over the next column are suggestions for discussion. The inherent risks of driving. You can ask, how many people have been involved in accidents? Maybe ask them, what if you've been hauling pesticides at the time when you got into an accident? Drowsiness is a big concern. And one thing I always like to do is ask people to remember, during the peak busy season, often the spring for, landscape or farmers, when they're working maybe 14-hour days, think of how tired they get and how much that's a risk when they're, driving. One of the best things I ever saw a guy do is, I was at a structural pest control training in Wisconsin. And in the session right before break, a guy was talking about transporting pesticides. And of course, everyone had come to this training in their service vehicles, basic pickups with the cap that, that locks and everything. And so he said, before I came in this morning, I walked through the hotel parking lot, and I found 2 service vehicles out there that didn't have the truck cap locked. And then he went on with his discussion, and when he ended, it was time for break, the whole room cleared out. And everyone went out to the parking lot and checked their trucks. And it was just brilliant, So, and they're not going to forget that, because you don't want people getting in there. So, things like that, we have suggestions of things you might want to do during the training. And so that's something, and there's a third column in there if you put your own notes, what's worked for you, what hasn't, thoughts you want to do. So we definitely try to make it your presentation, even though we've put the basics together. I keep forgetting I gotta hit the box. Okay, sure. And I did this again. Isn't that interesting? Over here. Try that. All right, that's interesting. All right. Still getting used to this thing. So, that's some of the ideas we present in the curriculum outline. We also provide a sample script, a slide-by-slide script. And we do that because, to flesh out what's on the slides. You've been to meetings or workshops where they hand you out the slides after a presentation, and a week later you look at the slides, but you can't remember everything they said. Right. And so what we do is we provide a script that's what we would say if we were giving the talk. So you can look through it and you can see all the points we're trying to cover, along with the curriculum guide. It's optional for you to use or modify as you see fit. The key thing is to still cover all those key concepts we list in the curriculum guide, but how you do it is up to you. And again, in that guide, we talk about things you might want to bring up. You have your own history, your own knowledge, and you tailor the talk that way, plus what your applicators and what their needs are and what their experiences are. The idea is we provide you with the curriculum outline, we provide you with the script as tools to help you, but we have no intention of turning you into a talking head, okay, and making you a remote Ron Gardner or a remote Dan Wickstead. It's just to help you put things together. And then there are several handouts that we would provide. One is we do provide a second PowerPoint presentation, the same presentation basically, but we provide some, we have the slides differently. We have the background removed, like here you see this kind of funky background, bluish purple background. We'd remove that and have everything just in simple black and white.
Okay.
So you can print it out like 4 or 6 slides per page, whatever you want to do, and make copies, and it copies well and it's legible. It will still have any graphics that might be there, but all this background stuff that makes it pretty on a screen often makes it really hard to read when it's run through a copy machine. So we provide, the second format of the PowerPoint presentation, so you can provide those slides if you want. We have notes and review pages, again, organized by learning objectives. And I'm going to show you this again. We're going to switch around here. I'm going to be good at this by the time we're done here. I have my own learning objectives for this. I'm going to remember that box. One of these days I'm going to remember that box. I always hit the title side of the box.
You did that time.
Yeah. Okay, so here would be another handout that would come. And you see at the, here at the top, here's the first learning objective. Describe the risks associated with transporting pesticides. And then we have some lines here. It's basically lined paper for people to take notes if they're note takers. And the idea here is instead of taking notes slide by slide, they're taking notes according to a learning objective. So later on when they review, they have information pertaining to that objective. So when they sit the exam, if there's anything about that objective on the test, they understand the material. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and so what we would want you to do is, as you start a presentation, I do it again, Ron. This is my worst point. Okay. As you start the presentation, remind them of that handout and why it's there, and that at the end you're going to ask them questions. Like I'm going to ask you your learning objectives. You're going to ask them about those things, and they should be prepared to answer. We also have some topic-specific handouts if applicable. For example, in the storage module, if you're familiar with that checklist about storing pesticides properly you have in the core manual, we provide that as a handout. In Ron's module on the pesticide label, he's got a label and a worksheet that asks questions about that label. You can give people as a homework assignment if it's a 30-hour course, or you can have them do in class during the training. So if there are handouts that are pertinent to the topic and that would be useful for you as a trainer, we try to provide those as well. All right, so now, do you have any questions about all that stuff yet?
No, it sounds great.
It's making sense? Okay. So let's look at part of the transporting pesticides module just to give you an idea of how it works. Usually the first slide that's going to come up is going to be listing some of the learning objectives. And what I'll do is show you, I'll sort of demonstrate how this all works by focusing on this one, discussing the features and precautions that make a vehicle suitable. Okay? What you would do is remind them that they have those notes pages. They could take notes if they want, and let them know when you're all done, you're going to ask them about features and precautions that make a vehicle suitable. And you're going to want them to respond. So that'll sort of wake them up a little bit, hopefully. And as you go through the discussion, through the presentation, when you come to slides that are addressing this learning objective, there will be a keyword or words at the top left, at the top of the slide. Here it's vehicle. And as we go through talking about what makes a vehicle appropriate, that keyword or phrase is always going to be present, and it's kind of a reminder to them that they're on this topic. Okay. And so, for example, we start here, you have whatever introductory, you introduce the topic here. Now we're going to talk about what makes a vehicle suitable. And then with each slide, a truck is preferred because you can carry pesticides in the back, reduces your exposure. You can talk about the truck bed. Provides containment, protects containers and equipment. But in each one of these slides, now we're talking about the truck bed covering. Okay, it encloses the bed. We talk about maybe have a flatbed truck or trailer. You notice every time that word vehicle is always up there. And then as you go through and you talk about the truck bed surface being non-porous and smooth and free of objects that could cut your containers open, when you get to the next learning objective, the keywords have changed.
Okay.
And now we're going to be talking about where items go in a vehicle. And it's just a blank slide, just the title, the keywords, a graphic, and you introduce this new topic. And what I would suggest is, remind them, well, now we're looking at something different here. And pretty soon they get the idea that, okay, now this is a new learning objective, it's a new topic. And if they want to take notes, I realize a lot of people don't, but if they want to, they know how to do it. And that's pretty much how you go through the presentation. Again, you can make it very interactive and have them, you can ask questions of them and tailor it to the audience and your experiences as well. And then as you get to the end, we have summary and review slides that have each objective one at a time. And this is where you go to the crowd and you ask them straight out, okay, give me some features or precautions that make a vehicle suitable, and see what they say. And if you have a dutiful note taker, they'll have a sheet that might look something like this. And they can respond, well, you want a non-porous truck bed. You want the truck bed enclosed with a lock. and they can go through some of the things. And what this does, it helps make it interactive. And it is tough. A lot of times you're just going to get stone-faced, and you really have to get them to talk. But once they start, they open up a bit because it also shows them that, okay, here's something you wanted them to learn, and lo and behold, they learned it. You know, and it just, that kind of reinforcement right away within a presentation, I think offers them encouragement. You know, that this is working, I can do this. And when they feel like they're learning something, that keeps them more awake. You know, if they're sitting there looking at all these slides wondering, how am I supposed to remember all this stuff? And they don't know what's the most important things to remember, you know, they start getting drowsy. This keeps them going. And so let's try you. Can you give me 3 topics you should cover before covering transport?
Sure. Well, personal protective equipment.
Okay.
Like the toxicity levels.
Right.
And pests. What's a pest? What's a pesticide?
Right, good, okay. That's fine. And here's the full list, okay? There could be more depending on how you do the training.
Right.
But, you know, you paid attention, so you remember these things.
Right.
Okay? Tell me whether the first truck shown in the presentation is photographed from the driver's side or the passenger side.
It was on the driver's side.
Great. You did it. Okay? Now, can you tell me the make or model of the second truck shown in the presentation? Was it a Ford F-150 or a
Ford, yeah.
Trailblazer, or do you remember what it was?
I want to say a Ford of some sort, but dark colored, I believe.
Okay. Okay, what color would you go with?
I would say like a dark green.
Dark green, okay. Here's the truck. It's a GMC Sierra, and it's black. It's Ron's truck, actually. Now, if I had told you up front that I wanted you to know what the model was, what the color was, do you think you would have remembered it?
I think so, yeah, because I was really trying to pay attention to that first truck.
Right. Exactly. And this is how learning objectives work. If you tell them up front what you expect them to know, then as they go through and they hear it, you tell them to be able to define pesticide drift, and they see that slide about the definition of drift, a flag goes up in their head right away. I'm supposed to know this.
Right.
And,
you know, clears away all the clutter stuff that they don't necessarily need to know.
Right, the stuff that puts it all in context.
Right.
But that they don't necessarily need to know. Yeah, so I've used this before. It always works. But it really highlights, if you tell someone something's important, they're going to notice it when they see it. And I also like to think, from an applicator, especially someone new coming into it, like a 30-hour course, you might have somebody brand spanking new. They don't necessarily know what's important and what's not. And so a lot of times they get caught up in the minutia of things, because they think they have to know every little thing, and they fail to see what's truly important. So, all right, well, that's a demonstration of how they work and how they're effective in helping you learn.
That's good.
Okay? And I think that's it for the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen those, some of the different components we provide. We'd also, when we send you a module or more than one module on a CD, it'll be in its own folder. All those components will be in its own folder, titled like Transporting Pesticides. One of the files, I've had people ask, well, why do you have a file called handouts that just says handouts? And that's all it is a Word document that literally just says handouts for transporting pesticides. And the reason we have one of those is if an instructor was doing a 30-hour course and they're using 5 or 6 of these modules, and they wanted to put them in a binder for the students, it's a way for the student, okay, here's the handouts for this topic.
Sort of like a title.
Yeah, it's like a title page for or if you wanted to make your own binder, for yourself, it's sort of a title page for what it is. So you would get the module, but you also get kind of an introduction to the whole, kind of a reminder of everything we just went through.
Okay.
It's just a Word document talking about what the components are, why objectives are important. It's only maybe 2 or 3 pages, I think.
Right.
But it's just a kind of a reminder of what's, what these are all about and why we care about how you present them. Because we think that this approach improves learning, and especially since these are now, paralleling what's going to be in the core manual, and eventually we'll have some for, for category manuals that will parallel those chapters. It's important that you realize that. So hopefully all the different modes of training will be reinforcing each other as we go along. Do you have anything to add, Ron?
I think we have covered 99% of it right there. Stephanie, if you've got any questions, and you can get back to us later, too, with questions. But we will add you to our list of approved instructors. And when you want to purchase these now, they're open for you.
Okay.
As we said, we don't allow them to be sold to.
I had,
Sure.
was I was looking at purchasing just one for now, but I can build on that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we sell them at $50 a piece for each module, and yeah, you can build on them from there.
Okay.
We have an order form, and what, you have her email?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think we sent you an order form.
Yes.
Oh, we did. Okay. Okay, fine. You can just fill that out and send it to Liz at the address that's on there.
Okay, great.
She's at Brown Road, on Brown Road here in Ithaca. She's off campus.
Right.
And she does all her shipping, so
Okay.
you send it to
And
her.
what's like the turnaround time, I guess? Could I fax it to her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And you fax it to her, it'll get shipped out Friday.
Okay, great. Perfect.
And if you just want the transport, I can get that CD ready for you, and we'll get it shipped out Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one we were thinking of to start with, and
Okay.
then go from there.
Okay.
This will
Okay.
be like our trial year.
Yep.
with it.
That's fine.
And then, because we do this annually, but I would like to expand on what we've been doing. So.
Okay.
Well, good. Stephanie, this has been great. Our first experience doing this on Adobe Connect.
Oh, great! It was really good. I thought it went really smoothly.
Okay, great. It worked for you. That's good. Okay.
Well, good. That's the important part. We usually do this in a lecture hall, and we may have 25 or 30 course instructors there.
When I mean, I don't see, how do you get that information out to educators? Like when do you normally do that?
Well, the DEC has set up workshops for 30-hour course sponsors, and they invited us to present at those workshops.
Okay.
And
it's usually been a DEC initiative.
yeah.
Okay. So it's not a cooperative extension. Okay.
Yeah, I think we've notified counties that that this process is available through our listserv. But yeah, we probably should market it a little bit again. There's been some turnover, get some more
Right.
people
We always
involved.
have new people in the field every year.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and now that this seems to work, we can do it for one or two people at a time. You could probably just somehow get this online, let people just
And it
download
was
it maybe.
really quick too. I thought it was going to be a lot longer.
We talked really fast today.
We did talk a little fast, but no, hopefully I didn't go too fast for you. But
No, and I think it definitely helped that I had done it before. I had presented a course before, not a 30-hour, but I've been through the topics. So I think that was helpful, and then seeing where your objectives fit was really, really nice.
Yeah. Good. Well, best success.
Thank you very much. We'll see. It's coming up very quickly. So.
Okay.
okay.